Good morning, YouTube. This is Los Angeles Prepper with another video, and today we'll be talking about recent events, mostly about the recent shooting at the church. Terrible event, obviously. So 10 things about that event. I guess number one was the event in itself. Most of you probably heard about the event. If you haven't, by some random chance, a young man went into a church with a rifle, shot a large number of the people in the church, and then left the church and was chased a little bit and shot, and allegedly took his own life. It's in a really small town, something like 600 people, like just tiny town. Just really, really sad event. So what was going on with this guy? Devon Kelly, I guess is his name. He had been kind of going through some, I mean, he'd gone off the deep end, obviously, but what led him to that point? He had some different things happening in his life. Got booted. Well, I don't want to lead with he got booted out of the Air Force. I'll lead with he was a violent person. He didn't know how to control. For whatever reason, he cracked his baby's skull. I mean, just like super sad, reading about. Beat his wife, abused his kid. That led to him being court-martialed, kicked out of the Air Force. So, who knows what happened. There's some, I'm sure there's more information coming to light about his life, but does anything justify that sort of action? Of course not. But I think it's important to look at, even if this guy's, a one in a million type case that does something like this, it's important to try to learn from terrible events like this. So it brings me to number three, gun control. Of course, you're going to get a lot of push towards gun control after actions like this, and as anyone that's sort of looked into this a little bit probably knows, it seems there might have been an administrative error by the Air Force, which happens, and in this case turned into something really unfortunate as far as his ability to own a gun, which he wasn't able to because of the dishonorable discharge. And in many states, I don't know if this is a federal law, but in many states, committing or having a history of domestic violence will prevent you from owning a gun. Certainly in California. I don't know about in other states. But another interesting thing to note about gun control is that the citizen that shot the shooter shot him with a very similar type of semi-automatic rifle that the shooter was using. So kind of a real obvious example of how the same tool can be used in such drastically different ways, and unfortunately an example that, even though there are many laws in place that currently require background checks that limit types of people with certain criminal pasts from owning firearms, that there are events like this that happen where someone that shouldn't own a gun gets a gun. So, gun control. You can expect a lot of talk about gun control. And actually, I've seen some interesting talk in opposition to gun control, especially from our president. President Trump talking about, I think he tweeted something to the effect of, thank heavens there was someone there with the gun. Otherwise, it could have been much worse. And it's, it's absolutely true. I'm sure that the police would have gotten there ultimately. Who knows what this guy would have done in between, you know. I mean, a 95 mile an hour chase is a tough chase. The police have cars and they can drive fast too, but practically speaking, it's a difficult thing to chase down someone driving 95 miles an hour. You know, looks easy in the movies, but in the movies they're driving like 45 or 50 miles an hour and they're kind of using fast camera angles. If they're even driving that fast, they might be driving 30, 40 miles an hour down the freeway and using all these camera angles. But to actually be driving at 95 miles an hour, chasing a guy who's clearly a lunatic, who's armed, that's no small feat. That's no small feat. So taking us into number 4, mental health. A very common cry after this is, we need more mental health in this country and need more services. I've been reading some comments on Reddit, and I guess sort of the current way that we do it after the government kind of defunded a lot of the mental health institutions is that mental health patients, will get admitted for a certain amount of time, get some meds, they'll try to get stabilized, and then they ultimately kind of release them. There's not exactly a lot of funds or services available to not hospitalize. I want to say not intern, but the word, to institutionalize, I guess. It's sort of the word. But to keep people permanently under the care of someone. So there's not, and look, I'm not talking about how you feel about that and can we afford it and can't we afford it and, don't take my money to pay for other people's stuff and all that stuff, okay? But I'm just stating it seems that the current state of affairs, I was looking for a different word than state, the current state in regard to mental health is that people kind of get a temporary treatment, then they're sort of pushed out in the general public. Now, granted, that's not really a great solution. Do I think that we need to lock people up? No, I don't necessarily, unless they're really a danger to themselves or to other people. But if they're just sort of not necessarily competent enough to live an adult life on their own, but they're not, they're also not sort of malintent to where they're trying to go out and cause harm to other people because of something that happened to them or something wrong with their brain or who knows what. There's a lot of reasons people might want to do bad onto other people. So what do I think about mental health in relation to this tragedy? I think we certainly as a society need to move towards more prevention. Even things like keeping people on their medication, trying to keep people that have mental health challenges in contact more regularly with health professionals or volunteers or private companies or whoever we're able to figure out as a society to pull together to put some resources towards this issue. We're only going to see benefit. Are we necessarily trying to, turn these people that are getting let loose out of the loony bin, quote unquote, not to be too insensitive about it? Are we trying to turn them into Walmart employees or, stockbrokers and lawyers and doctors tomorrow? Not necessarily, but the better standard of living, if we can get everyone in this country to the standard of living where they're eating right, they have some idea of what it is to live a healthy life. They have some ability to live a healthy life. We can't force people to make healthy choices, but if they have a roof, if they can get 2 or 3 square meals a day, if they're essentially safe and they're not sleeping on the streets and worried about getting knifed in the middle of the night or robbed or something, if we can kind of keep a basic level of humanity, I think we're going to see society improve. Now, how do we get there? And who pays for it? And do we force people to do it or we try to encourage them to do it? Look, that's a really deep discussion. I'm just saying that I think we would get a lot of positive benefits if we could strengthen the community, and not in a communist or socialist or, idealist, utopian kind of way, but whatever way that we can get there, I think it would be good if we can kind of move in that direction. A lot of ways we are, in a lot of ways we are. But at any rate, number 5 brings me right into number 5: society versus the individual. Whose responsibility is it ultimately? It's easy to say that it's up to every person on their own to. God, this website's updating every 5 seconds. It's up to every person on their own to to do right by society and to be a good person for the sake of being a good person. But we all know that that's not exactly how it works. Society and culture and friends and family and work and every influence that we have shapes who we are as a people. So do I think, not going off the deep end, that responsibility rests completely on the individual? No. I think it rests largely on the individual, but I'm choking on that word right now. But there's certainly, I think there's some slack. I think society can pick up a little bit of slack, and I don't think it has to be in an authoritarian kind of way. At the same time, we are in a capitalist society, so it's when things aren't profitable and taking care of people, that it can be expensive to take care of. At least presently, it's expensive to take care of people that need a lot of high touch medical treatment. Even if it's just regular check-ins, they might not need to be in the ECU every week, but if you have to check in with someone every day to take their meds, or if you have to give them the meds to make sure they're taking their meds, if they're just not going to take them, maybe not because they're trying to hurt themselves, but for whatever reason they're just don't have the capacity to be regular about taking their meds. Regular treatment like that, we currently don't have a lot of good automation. It'd be great if we did. It would be really great if we did, and it wouldn't be. It's not technically that difficult. If you remember the Fifth Element movie, his little morning alarm thing, his Google Home, if you will, popped out 5 cigarettes in the morning, and they were all jacked up cigarettes with really short amount of tobacco and a long filter or whatever. But anyways, something like that could dispense pills in the morning for people, if they were taking whatever their medication is, and you could have someone come by once a week or once a month and refill it. Now, would that be perfect? Would everyone work with that? Who's going to pay for the machine? I don't know. But let's say you got 20% of people that we released, into the free, 20% of people that had previously been institutionalized. And let's say for a relatively serious thing, maybe they caused an assault, maybe they hurt themselves, maybe they got really sick or something, whatever it is, they need to take their meds, no question about it, for the benefit of themselves and for humanity. Doctors agree they should be on some meds. Okay, let's move past, are we over-medicating people? Probably are over-medicating some people, but let's say these people are accurately medicated. If we can get 20 or 25% or 10% or 5%, whatever percent of people we can get to automatically take their meds, if it's 10 less trips to the ICU, if it's 5 less assaults or 1 or 2 less suicides, attempted suicides in a city, in a county, in a state, and obviously the bigger you get, the bigger those numbers get, that's worth something, that's worth a lot. It's a terrible loss. I think it's a terrible loss of potential. That's the saddest. I'm kind of an engineer in training. I'm looking at ways to improve systems, and even though I'm a human being, I'm also looking at things in a more analytical way often, because that's how I'm getting trained to. My dad was an engineer. I love him to death, and I've just sort of, I make lists and I make spreadsheets and I think about life like that. But anyways, it's a terrible shame that there are people that, but for a pretty modest investment, could be living better, fuller lives. Do we have to build brand new homes for every homeless person in Los Angeles? No, we don't. But can we make it a little bit more feasible for them to live somewhere legally, to where they can be safe and maybe have access to public water and some cheap electricity? I think we could do that without undermining the entire system. Most people would prefer to live in a modest, apartment if they could afford it. I'm kind of getting off track with like homelessness, but which leads me into number six, the state versus the individual. How much responsibility does the state have to solve our problems? How much can we solve on our own? Look at Tent City Slab City in, gosh, I don't know, wherever it is, in California. It's a area in unincorporated California where a bunch of people kind of do like a long-term, I wouldn't say long-term Burning Man thing, but since you guys probably have heard of Burning Man and haven't heard of Slab City, people live out there for free. They don't pay rent to anyone. They also don't have any services, as far as I know. At least not official services. The community kind of takes care of itself to a certain extent. But most of these people have incomes or some means to, when they go to the store to buy stuff, you know, they're supporting themselves somehow anyways. Most people aren't going out there to starve to death, but so that's an example of the individual taking care of themselves. And in this case, the state hasn't cracked down on Slab City. I'm sure if things were getting crazy and murders and they were making meth out there and God knows what, they would crack down on it. But if people are living out there and not really causing much harm, the state, in that case, especially being an unincorporated area, is going to give them a little bit of breathing room. Versus me here in the city, if I want to start a business in my house, got to be careful about doing that. If I want to park on the street overnight, I got to get a permit. If I want to install a new window in my house, I have to do it between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. If I want to open carry a firearm, can't do it. If I want to concealed carry a firearm, got to get permission. Got to get a permit. They might issue a permit if they want to, at least in the state of California. So, the state of California has taken a pretty aggressive stance on things like gun control, for example. What do you think? What do you think about the state versus the individual? Really, really difficult question. There's not one right answer. I think the state has some responsibility. We have military, we have, public institutions. State helps do things like keep the roads working, keep fire engines working, keep hospitals and ambulances, and a lot of private institutions intermingled with that. But anyways, state versus the individual. Number 7, mainstreamification. All these shootings, I say all these shootings, but the mass shootings that we hear about, and we hear about every one essentially, in different proportions, get thrown up on the news and rinsed and repeat and recycled and just regurgitated over and over and over again, to the point where it becomes, you become desensitized to it. I'm fighting right now, like trying to resensitize myself to some of this stuff that's going on. And I think that's something that kind of separates preppers from the rest of the communities, that when a hurricane happens in Houston, most people think, first they think, oh, that's terrible. And then they think, oh, I'm glad I don't live in Houston. Because they sort of are just like, well, shit, I'm glad that doesn't happen to me. Or, someone hears about an earthquake in California, the first thing they think is, oh, wow, that's really rough. And the second thing they think is, well, I'm glad I don't live in California. I don't have to deal with earthquakes. Or I don't have to deal with forest fires. And, so there's a very big disconnect, whereas the prepper is always thinking, man, those looters, we shoot, you loot, we shoot and stuff like that. Man, I'm glad I own a firearm. Or, oh, the power's been out in Puerto Rico for 2 months. I'm glad I have a solar panel. Or I'm glad I have, my radio with some rechargeable batteries. Kind of ties into number 8, public misconception over these tragedies and the frequency of tragedies and the likelihood of any given thing affecting their life. As a citizen in America, as a resident in California, I'm a lot more likely to have issues with the power going out from a windstorm or a forest fire or an earthquake, maybe a disruption to water if the power's out for a long time. We have some local reservoirs, but most of our water is from very, very far away, especially in SoCal here. So, does it make sense for me as a Californian to get all wrapped up in worried about being the victim of a mass shooting. Even especially with me living near San Bernardino, and San Bernardino had a terrible mass shooting a while ago. Not so far off in the distance. It was a couple years. Can't even remember. 2015. Yeah. Terrible attack. So I think this mainstreamification causes this public misconception that this stuff happens all the time, or that it's like the number one problem that we should be focused on. And look, I'm all for preventing death too, but you have to, if you take a really sort of dumb opinion that, okay, let's prevent death, let's prevent the most death, you have to look at stuff like heart disease and car accidents and suicide and overdoses, and there's a lot of causes of death in this country that kill a lot more people than guns do, but they're not as popular. People would rather ban guns than they would ban soda or ban, burgers. Man, if you tried to ban hamburgers, I might protest in the street. You try to ban hamburgers, I don't know, but people would rather ban clips than ban, high fructose corn syrup or hydrogenated vegetable oil or, GMO food. Or at least liberals would. Thank God there's a good part of the country that's red and that understands that guns are for hunting and plinking and protecting your family, and that's it, Crazy people are going to do crazy shit, whether it's with a knife, a bat, a machete, a car, whatever, The best way to stop crazy is to help those that you can as a society, and have a modest, have a law enforcement presence, have a military presence in the case of like crazy leaders in charge of crazy countries. That's how you take care of that. Number 9, history of guns in America. This is such a fascinating one. Guns used to be a lot easier to get. Buy them in hardware stores. You could buy them in mail order catalogs. Schools had hunting clubs. Boy Scouts still to this day teach their young scouts how to hunt. Not how to hunt, but how to shoot. I don't think there's a hunting merit badge, but there is like a rifle merit badge, shotgun merit badge, or maybe it's just a shooting merit badge. I can't even remember. I think they're separate badges. But anyways, whatever they were, I got both of them. Proud Eagle Scout here. But guns have been in this country for forever, but we haven't had these crazy mass shootings for forever. So you have to think about that, Why now are people acting out in this way, these lone wolf kind of attacks, or, very select group of people? Why is this happening? Which brings me to number 10, fiction versus reality. Let me see how long this video is right here. 23 minutes. Well, gonna take a while to upload. Speaking of which, my uploads have gotten faster, so whatever was happening, I don't know, cross my fingers. Fiction versus reality. People want to live in fiction. They want to live in guns are bad and we ban clip. I actually just changed my comment response. I sort of responded in a really snarky way to this guy online, and I decided that, what? Negativity just foments more negativity. So I changed my comment to disagree with him, but in a more civil way. But I just hate people saying stupid, doublespeak bullshit. Like, he commented, I think it was a he, but they commented, doesn't matter at any rate, but person commented, oh, they always think, liberals are trying to take their fucking guns. And he used the expletive, so don't blame me. And then 2 lines later, the person said, but I don't think people need semi-automatics with the capability to rapid fire 30 rounds, blah, blah, blah. Just complete disconnect from reality as far as I'm actually really surprised. Like, if you're really trying to stop people from firing quickly, you would say, I don't think people need automatic rifles capable of firing rapidly. Because nothing fires more rapidly than an automatic rifle. Yeah, Gatling guns are like even faster than your standard automatic rifle. But at any rate, so I feel like he said, or the person said semi-auto just because they heard the term so much in the media. They're like, oh, semi-auto is bad, when really semi-auto is sort of the argument that, like, look, we've already taken out the automatic firing in a lot of states, unless you're kind of grandfathered in. But automatic weapons are generally pretty restricted in this country, federally as well as by state. So, and then the whole thing of like firing X rounds rapidly, or I don't think someone should be able to fire 500 rounds rapidly or 1,000 rounds rapidly. It's like, even if you make the clip 5 rounds, you can fire 5 rounds and change a clip, and fire or 10 rounds and change a clip, and 10 rounds and change a clip. There is a difference. It's a few seconds between one 30-round clip and 3 10-round clips, but either way, it's a lot of destruction that someone crazy could do in either situation, with one 30-round clip or one 10-round clip. So this idea that banning the amount of things in a clip, or banning, I mean, yeah, I guess if you banned all semi-automatic rifles, but the thing is, it's still, you're not gonna remove semi-automatic rifles from existence. The theoretical magic fairyland way to stop gun attacks would be to, like, transport all the guns off the planet or something. You'd have to all at once remove all the guns, but then people that wanted to make guns or create guns would still, like, then you'd have to take out all the gunpowder and all the things that resemble a tube and all the metal. Like, it's a completely impossible thing to ban all weapon, or to sort of remove all weapons from the planet. So this idea that you can't take a ridiculous argument onto its logical conclusion. If you really try to look at, let's ban things that hurt people, it's not remotely feasible. It's just not, unfortunately. It'd be nice if in Magic Fairyland you could just ban people from hurting other people, but it doesn't work like that. And even perfectly normal citizens, I think the reason a lot of people don't really have this connection with what it is to own a firearm, or to be around people that have firearms, and to see people using firearms in normal ways, like to go to the range and see dozens and dozens of people with very lethal firearms, using them in a completely normal manner, because most of America is watching TV, and they watch people shoot guns and they play video games. But, if you ask your neighbor, hey, have you been hunting recently, or have you been to the range recently? Even if they have a firearm, their answer is, they probably won't have a firearm, depending on where you live. I don't know if a lot of your neighbors have firearms, but I'm pretty sure a lot of my neighbors don't. But most people just aren't living in reality. You can't say it much better than that. It's, I'm looking at this picture of Marilyn Manson pointing a fake gun at a crowd at a San Bernardino concert. Not really appropriate. Artistic or otherwise, not appropriate, dude. Not cool. Anyways, this has been a really long video, but I just think it's important that we talk about this stuff, and I'm not necessarily trying to convince you to feel one way or the other. I just want you to kind of think about what your own feelings are on these issues. Think about what other people's feelings are on these issues, and try to get a sense of whether or not you're living in fiction versus reality. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.